Ramaya Ramabhadraya Ramachandraya Vedasi Raghunathaya Nathaya Sitaya Pataye Namaha. Uttarakhand, chapter number 37. Ravana is defeated by Arjuna. The recitation begins now. At no distance from where, on the banks of the river Narmada, that dreadful lord of Rakshasas collected the flowers, Arjuna, the king of Mahishmati and the foremost of the victorious, was sporting with his wives in the water. And being encircled by them, the king Arjuna appeared like a leading elephant, surrounded by thousands of she-elephants. In order to measure the strength of his 1,000 arms, the king of Hayas obstructed the course of Narmada. Being obstructed by the arms of the KartaviryaArjuna and having flooded the banks with her pure waters, Narmada flowed in an opposite direction. And the currents, rising high as during the rainy season, flowed with fishes and crocodiles. And that stream, as if driven against Ravana by KartaviryaArjuna, carried away his collection of flowers. And having given up his worship, which was half finished, Ravana looked towards Narmada, looking like an unwilling damsel, and saw that she, with rising currents, was flowing towards the east from the west, and the waters beyond that were in a natural state, like a quiet lady, and the birds were seated there without any anxiety. Thereupon, being anxious to learn the cause of the rise of the river, Dasagriva hinted Shuka and Sarana. Being commanded by Ravana, the two brothers, the heroic Shuka and Sarana, proceeded towards the west by the aerial way. And going half a league, the two night rangers saw a man sporting in the waters with some females. He was huge like a sala tree. His hairs were floating on the water. He was inebriate, and his eyes were reddened in consequence thereof. Like unto Sumeru holding the earth with his 1,000 feet, he obstructed the current of the river with his 1,000 arms, and he was surrounded by thousands of beautiful damsels, like an elephant by thousands of she-elephants. Beholding that dreadful spectacle, the Rakshasas, Shuk and Saran, came back and approaching Ravana, communicated everything to him. O Lord of Rakshasas, an unknown person, huge as a sala tree, is sporting with females, obstructing the course of Narmada like unto a dam. And being withheld by the 1,000 arms of that man, the waters of Narmada were continuously throwing up high waves. Hearing the words of Shuk and Saran, Ravana exclaimed, "This is Arjuna," and proceeded to fight with him. Ravana, the lord of Rakshasas, having set out with a hostile intention against KartaviryaArjuna, the wind mixed with dust began to blow high with tumultuous sound. And the clouds began to mutter with a downpour of rain. And the lord of Rakshasas proceeded against Arjuna with Mahodar, Mahaparsha, Dhumraksha, Shuk and Saran. Within a short time, the dreadful Rakshasa, powerful as the elephant Arjuna, reached the banks of Narmada and espied their Arjuna encircled by females as an elephant surrounded by she-elephants. At the very sight, the eyes of the lord of Rakshasas, proud of his prowess, grew red, and addressing the counselors of King Arjuna, he said, "Do ye communicate unto the king of the Hayas that Ravana, the lord of Rakshasas, has come to fight with him?" Hearing the words of Ravana, the ministers of Arjuna stood up with arms and said, "O good Ravana, thou art well cognizant of the proper time for fighting. Now our king is drunk and is sporting with the females in the waters. And now dost thou want to fight with him? Therefore, O Dasagriva, do thou spend the night here, if thou art bent upon fighting. Or, even if thou art anxious to enter speedily into conflict with Arjuna, do thou slay us all at first, and then fight with the king." Thereupon the hungry counselors of Ravana slew some of the ministers of the king and devoured some. There arose a dreadful uproar on the banks of river Narmada of the counselors of Ravana and Arjuna. The warriors of Arjuna assailed Ravana and his ministers with hundreds of arrows, prashas, darts, tomaras, thunderbolts, and karpanas. The warriors of Arjuna became dreadfully furious and emitted cries like the roaring of the deep infested with crocodiles, fishes, and other marine monsters. thereupon, being enraged and displaying their own prowess, Sarana and other ministers of Ravana began to destroy Arjuna's soldiers. Thereupon the emissaries, stricken with fear, went to the sporting king and communicated unto him the proceedings of Ravana and his ministers. Hearing those words and saying unto the females, "Do not fear," he rose up from the waters like an elephant. The eyes of that fire like Arjuna were reddened with ire, and he shone dreadfully like the fire of dissolution. And taking up speedily his club, that one, always using golden clubs, pursued the Rakshasas like unto darkness following the sun. Holding up the huge club and hurling it with his arms, Arjuna, resorting to the velocity of Garuda, went on. Thereupon stood there obstructing his course the Rakshasa, worked up with anger, and with a mace in his hand like unto the Vindhya range, standing in the way of the sun. And throwing down off his hand the iron mace, he in anger began to roar like Yama. And the top of the mace was ablaze like the tips of Ashoka flowers. Not the least agitated on beholding that mace, the king Arjuna by his club baffled its action. Thereupon, uplifting the huge club 500 hands long, the king of Hayahayas pursued Prahasta, and within a short time, being struck down by that club, gifted with great velocity, Prahasta fell down on earth like unto the summit of a mountain, clapped down by the thunderbolts of Indra. Beholding Prahasta fallen, Maricha, Shuk, Saran, Mahodar, and Dhumraksha fled away from the battlefield. All the counselors fled away, and Prahasta, defeated, Ravana speedily proceeded towards Arjuna, the foremost of kings. Thereupon there ensued a terrible encounter, capable of making down erect between the 1,000-armed Arjuna, the king of men, and the 20-armed Ravana, the king of Rakshasas. And taking up their clubs, Arjuna and Ravana began to fight with one another, emitting cries like the mutterings of clouds, like unto two huge bulls fighting for a cow, two agitated oceans, two moving mountains, two effulgent Adityas, two burning flames, two proud elephants, two proud lions, and like the very Rudra and Kala. As the mountains suffer many clappings of thunderbolts, so did they bear many strokes. And all the quarters were resounded with the sound proceeding from the stroke of their clubs, like unto the sound of thunderbolts. Being placed against the breast of Ravana, Arjuna's club rendered for a moment the welkin looked like the burning gold as does the lightning. And striking again and again against Arjuna's breast, Ravana's club looked like a huge firebrand. Arjuna was not worn out, nor was Ravana, and the conflict went on between them like the encounter between Bala and Vasava in the days of yore. The king of men and the king of Rakshasas assailed and wounded one another with their clubs, like unto two bulls striking one another with their horns, and two elephants with their tusks. Thereupon, worked up with rage, Arjuna with his full might smote Ravana on his breast with his club. But Ravana was well protected by the boon of the celestial, so the club fell on earth, sundered into two pieces like one hurled by a weak wight. Still wounded by the mace of Arjuna, Ravana, shedding tears, ran away at a distance of 4 feet and sat there. Beholding Ravana thus overwhelmed, Arjuna sprang up and caught him like Garuda holding a serpent and Vishnu binding Bali. Dashagriva being thus bound, the Siddhas, Charanas, and the celestials exclaiming, well done," showered flowers upon Arjuna. And the king emitted leonine roars again and again, as a joyous tiger roars like a cloud, holding a deer under its grasp. Regaining his sense and beholding Ravana bound, Prahasta in great anger pursued the king of Hayahayas. And the Rakshasa force grew tempestuous like unto the rising of the ocean during the rains. Thereupon exclaiming repeatedly, leave him off, wait. The Rakshasa host hurled hundreds of musalas and darts in the battlefield. Not the least moved thereby, the king Arjuna, the slayer of enemies, bore those weapons of the enemies of the celestials. Thereupon, baffling the weapons of the Rakshasas by means of many a dreadful and excellent one, Arjuna, the king of Hayas, drove them away like winds scattering the clouds. Having thus struck terror into the night rangers, he, encircled by his own men, repaired to his own city with Ravana, carrying him bound like unto Indra carrying Bali around. Thereupon flowers and fried paddy were showered upon him by the Brahmanas and the citizens. Mangalam Kushlendraya Mahaniya Gunapti Chakravarti Dhanurjaya Sarvabhaumaya Mangalam.